Good evening, Your Honor and council members. Before you is an item that has kind of been around a little bit and was originally discussed at the Transportation Commission really over about 2 years ago and has come back occasionally. Ultimately made its way to the Administration Committee, and the committee asked that the Transportation Commission delve a little further into the item, showing support for the concept. So the Transportation Commission has done that and then reported back to the Administrative Committee at their last session. And what we're talking about is the issue of bikes on sidewalks in downtown Moscow. It is an item that really has been, I think, around anecdotally for many years. There are many stories that people like to tell about, I'm walking downtown and a bicycle comes very near me, just, flying by, or I'm stepping out of a downtown business, I open the door and there's a bike coming by at that moment, those types of things. And I think we've probably all heard those stories over the years. So the Transportation Commission was really looking at, is it truly a problem, and if so, how best to address it? In the end, the Commission came back with some recommendations to Administrative Committee. There was discussion about whether or not there should perhaps be an ordinance that would ban wheels, collectively being skateboards, rollerblades, and bicycles, and things of that nature on sidewalks downtown. The committee and the Commission, I think, were both hesitant to go down that route. There was a desire perhaps to do an outreach and education type program and in more of an encouragement type effort rather than a prohibition. So the Transportation Commission really followed that path. They bought into that concept. They liked the idea of continuing our outreach and education efforts similar to the Safe Routes to School programs, and have come back with a series of recommendations. And on the dais tonight, in front of each of your seats, there was a copy of a memo dated March 19, 2014. That is an updated version of what was in your packet, which was from back in February, and it's the one that was intended to be included, so now you have it. And that's the one that we'd like to talk from this evening. The thought of the Commission was that we should first focus on Main Street between 1st and 6th Street, kind of that initial pilot test area. The area where we have probably the greatest pedestrian traffic in the downtown business district, and potentially then the greatest conflict between bicycles or rollerblades on the sidewalk and those pedestrians that are visiting the district. So the thought being that we would start there. It could be expanded at some point into the future, the program that's being proposed, but initially we have to start with a small step. In order to take a more positive approach rather than a prohibition, a couple things are recommended and suggested by the Transportation Commission. First off, the idea is that we want to encourage folks not to ride their bicycle on those sidewalks. And that could be done through a dismount zone. The thought was that they would like to see a message that's more positive and along the lines of walk your wheels. And on the second page of the handout that you received, there's a picture down at the bottom that shows an example of that type of a message. In this case, it's a pedestrian zone, please walk your wheels, with a picture of a person with holding onto a bicycle and a skateboard. So something along that line is their thought about how to convey the idea of, you're in the downtown pedestrian zone, let's walk. And if you would like to ride your bike, there's an opportunity to do so that's not on the sidewalk, which is kind of the second part, which would be the installation of a device called a Shero, which is a emblem that has a bicycle, similar to what you've seen on the bike path, for instance, with a couple of chevron-type arrows next to it. So it's a shared arrow Shero concept. They're pretty common in a lot of the bigger cities today, Portland, Seattle, where there are a lot of bike riders, and they are put on the roadway to help the drivers recognize that there are going to be bicycles on the road, and you're sharing the space, and bicycles are allowed to be there. They have every right to be there. Be aware of them, recognize that they're there, and try to avoid conflicts that can happen. Main Street is seen as a really good location for our first Shero implementation process, and part of the reason for that is it is a relatively low-volume street. and is a fairly low-speed street. The typical speed out there is 15 to 18 miles per hour, which is lower than most residential streets that you see. So it's a good location for that shared use and encouraging those bicyclists to actually get out into the street. The concept here would be that we would place sharrows near the center line of the roadway so that they're not near the back of those cars that are diagonally parked because of some sight distance issues. So we encourage the bikes to actually hug the center line and ride out in that area. Again, providing a location that people can ride that should be relatively comfortable for most riders that's not on the sidewalk. Now again, this is an encouragement program, so if somebody chooses to ride the sidewalk, they have every right to do so. Good instances where people might want to do that is if they have children with them. They don't want to take their 6-year-old out onto the street. They'd rather go down the sidewalk. That's fine. We would encourage them to actually get off and walk, because that would be the preferred route on the sidewalk if they don't choose to ride in the street for comfort reasons. The message that would be conveyed on the sidewalk system itself would consist of two parts. One would be signage that would be placed in prominent locations at the beginning of each block in each direction to help spread the message that you are in a dismount zone. Please walk your wheels. Not everybody looks up when they're riding a bicycle to see those types of signs. So the second item would be an on-the-ground emblem or application similar to the picture that I pointed out earlier that is actually on a sidewalk surface. So as you enter into a block, there would be a symbol of this type. For riders that are actually looking down at the pavement, watching where they're going, they would see that emblem that says, hey, please walk your wheels while you're down here. So that's the idea behind what transportation has worked out. Obviously, there would be some additional public outreach efforts in the form of the National Ride Your Bike to Work Day, which is coming up in May, on May 16th. Probably also an event at the Farmers Market, perhaps on May 17th, which is the following Saturday, the next day, where we could help point out the sharrows in the roadway that everybody's going to be walking on during the market and say, what is this? And this is why it's here, and this is what it's about. So those types of things, obviously other types of outreach through the press releases and perhaps articles with the newspaper. So that is the concept that is being brought forward as a recommendation by Transportation Commission. Staff supports the idea. We think this would be a good application for sharrows. First in the city, there will be others that will be proposed on certain bike routes that are coming forward here in the near term, but also then to help encourage folks to use the sidewalk as a walking facility in the downtown core, walk those wheels, and if you want to ride, go ahead and ride on the street downtown. With that, I'm trying to entertain any questions that you
before I'm going to turn over to Tom here in just a second, but I want to make a comment because when we were back in Washington, D.C., Tom Lamar and Gary Reeder and myself, there were some terrific examples of some bike paths. We walked all over that town, and Tom took a number of pictures, actually, and it was pretty intriguing because they had back and forth traffic and no left turns and different things. I thought that was pretty interesting how they did that city. Of course, you're talking about a large metropolitan area, compared to Moscow, but I thought that was pretty neat. We got evidence of seeing some pretty cool stuff. And I don't recall ever seeing a bike on the sidewalk there. Tom?
Well, and that's why I think the strength of this proposal that's before us, to me, from a bicycle riding perspective, is that the sharrows themselves are really the more important tool here because it helps to provide a positive location where we want people to ride their bikes out in the street. Their vehicles, they belong out in the street, and that's the best place for people to ride. It's safer for everybody involved. So providing the sharrows out there, giving people a clear message, a clear positive message to ride in the street with traffic, I think really is the most important tool. And the secondary tool is the pedestrian zone markings on the sidewalks that reinforce to those people that didn't get the first message of riding in the street. So I think together the two go to fall in and help to pull people out of the sidewalks and so forth. And Les presented it from the other perspective, from the sidewalks perspective, but I think really if we can get people to ride. And we all know that in Moscow there are those anarchist bicyclists that exist in Moscow, people ride in the wrong direction and all sorts of things. But hopefully we can better instruct people where to ride. And I think the other message that the Transportation Commission folks tried to make was to refer to it as a pedestrian zone rather than a dismount zone. So I think that's the way to go.
Dan?
So thanks for...
Yeah, I wanted to ask Les, and I don't think we thought of it in Transportation Commission, but will we have any signage for motor vehicles other than the Sharrows? Maybe if some sort of sign, share the road that shows the Sharrow on that sign. I mean, I know we don't want to clutter up downtown with a lot of signs, but something, because I'm, not necessarily always looking at the road when I'm driving either. You're looking at the signage as well. Is there something like that maybe we could do at either end to kind of help with the sharing the road with the bicycles?
Yeah, certainly there are some possibilities there. We do have share the road signs downtown now.
Right.
And I challenge people to find them because most
Signage
folks,
is
after a
all-
while, you just stop seeing them.
Right.
And, I can tell you where a few of them are because I look for them. But,
Right.
yeah, that's certainly something we can look at if there are some key locations that perhaps would convey the message well. That may be something that we do as a phased approach. Perhaps we start with the on-the-ground markings, and if we're seeing potential conflicts, perhaps add some additional signage.
Yeah, I think if
where appropriate.
if it showed what the road sign was meaning, or the street
In some
markings
form,
were
yeah,
meaning, that
convey
might
it up
help
as
as
well.
well.
Yeah, we're obviously trying to avoid sign overload
Right.
because, it adds up. But, yeah, certainly that's something we would look at as well.
Just hit a roundabout for sign overload.
There you go.
Mayor? I just wanted to add that I think that it would be nice if we could make this happen from A Street, basically between the couplets, from A Street all the way down to Lewis. I think it would be a better experience for keeping it continuous, both for the users of the sidewalk and the users of the road.
Wayne?
Well, I think it's a really good idea. I like the area that it's in right now. I think Tom brings up a good point, although the businesses start to thin out as we get further south towards the hospital. But actually, one area that I think it would be nice if we could incorporate it also would be 3rd Street from Washington to Jackson.
Yeah.
The problem is, now we've got State Highway 8, which is 3rd Street, and trying to put Sharrows on that might be an issue. But, we talk about complaints. Probably the most frequent complaints over the last 6-7 years of being on council that I've heard from downtown businesses is the bicycle problem. And so getting them off the sidewalks is good. I personally have been run down by a bicycle as I was coming out of a business. So, yeah, that is an issue. So I'll certainly support it. And in fact, I would go ahead and make a motion that we approve the recommendation of the Transportation Commission and support the proposed dismount zone concept and educational outreach effort.
I'll second that.
Okay, Wayne made a motion to accept this.
Except they didn't call it a dismount zone.
I was going to ask that. They wanted to name something more friendlier. So what do you call that, Tom?
Pedestrian zone. I think
Pedestrian.
what they referred to it in the most recent memo.
Okay.
I'm okay with, if Wayne's okay with saying pedestrian
That's
zone, I'm
fine.
okay with it.
Instead of the dismount zone, we'll strike out that word dismount and put pedestrian in. Sound good? John, you're the only counselor that didn't have a chance to discuss. You got anything you would like to add?
I have
to the
not a
discussion? Not a word. Okay. Well, how about if we start with a vote with you, John?
I'll go along.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's 4-0 to accept this. Thank you very much, Les. It will be called the pedestrian zone and not the dismount zone.
If I may, real quick, just show you something I was able to just pull up. One of the sign options we're looking at for the Walk Your Wheels encouragement would look something like
Oh,
this.
cool.
Oh, I kind of like
Oh,
that.
those are neat.
Yeah, that goes with our historic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
There you go.
cool.
I like that.
It conveys the same message, and it, as you say, it kind
That
of
I
fits
like.
with that historic district.
Yeah,
So
I like
we're
it.
looking at this
I
as
like
a
it better than
possibility
that.
for what that signage might
I
look
like
like.
that.
That's
pretty neat, Les.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
You got to have a skateboard with him too. But I don't know what I'm
They invented them back then, but it does fit
Mess that
our,
sign up, Dan.
so there's an idea.
That's good. Nice job.
Thank you, Les.